In this video, we're going to create an organization chart using Excel data. This is the most basic way to automate an organization chart, and we're doing this in OrgChart Platinum. At the conclusion of this video, you will see how we create an org chart that looks like this. So it has boxes and links. It's filled with information about each person, and this will only take a few seconds to generate. But I would like you to see the end result first, and then we're going to show you how we actually get there. Here's an example of a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that we're using to import and create the organization chart. Whenever you're importing data into the OrgChart program, it's important to note that there are two columns that are very important, as they will be the ones that determine the hierarchy that is going to be used in construction of the organization chart. In my example here, I have a couple of columns. Column B here is an employee number, and column G is a manager ID number. And the way this particular configuration is going to work is it's going to be employee number reports to a manager ID number. And as we can see here, the only person who doesn't have a manager ID number would be our person at the top. This is Joseph Goldberg. So apart from that, building a hierarchical chart, this is the standard information that we would need. If you've got those two pieces of information, then after that, you can have anything else that you'd like. In this case, we have the name of the employee, their title, we have a position type. We can indicate whether they're going to hang as a regular team member or as an assistant. We can have other information such as a dotted line relationships or dotted line managers. And we can even have a photograph. Let me scroll out here for a second to see where the photograph is kept. Okay, here we have a column here for photo file. And when it comes to putting photos in the OrgChart program, it's important to note that all we need is the name of the image file, and then that file has to exist in the same folder that we are importing the Excel from. You might wonder if there's any way around that. Yes, there is. If you want to, you could keep the photos in a separate folder. You would just have to have a path statement in front of every image file here in order for the program to find it. We'll show you what that looks like. Here's an example in File Manager showing where we're keeping the Excel file that we're importing, and it's also showing the photos that are within that same folder. So each one of these files is going to be called according to that column W that I showed before, and whatever the image name is that's associated with that record, that's the photo that's going to appear on the chart. Now, I also want to mention that the order of these columns is not important, and you can call these columns anything you want. They do not have a required naming convention. You could call it photo file, you could call it image file. Employee name could be the employee's name, it could be name, it could be anything that you want. So the only thing that you need to do is to make sure that you're following the basic structure of the file, which is that in every case we've got to have two columns that indicate the individual, which is a unique identifier, and then who it is that person reports to. And we need to use the same denomination or the like kind of piece of data in order to establish that hierarchy. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and proceed with the import process. As you have the OrgChart program open, then we'll proceed to the Data tab. On the Data tab, there is an import icon, and that launches the import wizard. So in our example, we're going to be importing data from Excel, but keep in mind that there are other types of data that can be imported. Pretty much any database, SAP, Microsoft Access, Oracle, You name it, we can take data from any data source. But this is the most common example, is to be using data from Excel. I proceed through the wizard and I select the file that we're going to be using the Browse button. This dialog gives you an opportunity to choose which tab on the Excel file to select. The program normally figures out the tab that has the correct data, but just to let you know, in case you have an Excel sheet with multiple tabs, that this would be the area where, if you needed to, you could swap tabs here. This is a very important step in the import wizard where the hierarchy method is determined. And in this case, almost all of the time, you're going to be using a 2-column hierarchy. So that radio button is pre-selected, and then you need the fields. What is the unique identifier for the individual? In this case, it's going to be employee number. And who does the employee number report to? It's going to be the manager ID number. And that was all established in the data that we looked at previously. If you have that correct, and the program normally is very good at predicting the hierarchical relationship, then you'll see a hierarchy emerging on the right-hand side. And so this nested appearance here is really giving insight into the structure of the organization. If you were going to use matrix relationship or dotted line hierarchy, you would use this button here. More about that in a separate video. This simply looks for additional information about who else does a person report to. And in OrgChart, just so that you know, an individual can have up to 10 dotted line relationships. At this stage, it is determined which fields are going to be visible within each box on the OrgChart. So in this case, I really don't care about showing the employee number. We're just going to show the employee name and the title, and we'll put some word wrap on the title. It's also important to note here that managing system columns, if we have an assistant type record, if someone's an assistant, and that object can hang a bit differently in the organization chart. So we could set that up here, in which case we're simply going to do a mapping. And the mapping we're looking for in this case is what it's called in our data set, which is assistant, and then we find the corresponding field in the program, which is going to be is assistant also. We establish a mapping for that, and then we OK it. And you'll see how that looks when we're done. We'll also cover this in a future video, but you have the opportunity here to apply a template. So templates can be created if there's a particular marketing look and feel that you want, or if there's certain data analytics that you put into a chart, and you can save those off into a template, and with any data set that's being imported, then you have the opportunity to apply that. That will be a separate video. Also to note here that there is an option to compress photos. So if you have photos that are large and you have many of them, many records within your chart, that can add up to become a rather large file. And so you have the opportunity here for photo compression. Our chart is not that large that I'm working with right now, so it's not going to be an issue. However, if you're in situations where you're dealing with many records that could be in the thousands, and you find that photographs are adding considerable weight to the file size, then you can use this optimization, and that'll be covered in a separate video as well. At this last step here, it is determined how we're going to paginate the chart. The chart I showed you previously had a number of managers on it, and underneath each manager there was an arrow. The arrow, if you clicked on it, it would take you to subordinates for that individual. So we have our choices here. If I break this down at every level, then every management grouping is going to have an arrow. And if I click on that arrow, it'll take us into the subchart or the division for that manager. If I were to click on Do Not Create, that means that everybody that I'm importing is going to show up on one page. So we're going to do a pagination where we're going to break everything down at each level. Okay, so all we do here is we click here, and then we're going to proceed to next. The last step is to click next, and here is the resulting chart. So a couple of things. We wanted photos, and I'd also like to see about a different arrangement style where all of the managers could be horizontal. It is important to note that we have Susan here, who was an assistant, and she is hanging differently off of her boss in that relationship. That's an assistant style. And we have everyone else showing up as a team manager. But let's go ahead and see how we can change some of this. The first thing we want to do is put photos in. The first thing I'll do is inspect one of these boxes. So I click on the edge of it, and then I can right click and go to Properties. In Properties, I can use the photo file here on the left hand side, and I can drag it into the preview and put it on the left hand side. Okay, so that's one way that I can do it. Another way is to actually use a little preset here to put the photo on the left hand side. And I can select a scope here that I want to apply, which can be to the entire chart. And here's the result if I do that. The next thing we can do is change the arrangement that we're looking at here. For that, we'll go to the Home tab. We'll click on the top person, and then we'll go over to the Arrange icon. And here you can see that there's a series of choices that are available for layout. I'm going to pick the one that is horizontal, and so now everybody is arranged in a horizontal fashion. The next thing I would like to do is change the size of these photos. I think they're a little too large. For that, I can simply click on a photo, I can drag its edge inward, and that photo becomes smaller. Now there is an auto sizing function that's going on with the program. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and select this box. I'm going to introduce you to the Format Painter, and there's two brushes. There's one that exists as for individual boxes, so I can select an individual box and then click and then hit another box, and it'll inherit all the same properties that I was using before. The other thing I can use is what is called the Paint Format Wizard. If I click on that, then that gives me all the possibilities of doing the entire chart, any scope that I wish. And the other thing is that there's options for exactly what I want to change. If I want to change every attribute in terms of the fill, the font, picture size, frame border, and so forth, I can control all that from options. But in this case, I'm simply willing to accept that all I wanted was a smaller photo, and I want to do this for the entire chart. So if I click OK, then everybody gets it. So the benefit of using the Format Painter is that you import the data one time. It's very easy to go ahead and make these changes. Using Format Painter, you don't have to go from box to box to make these changes happen. Now, the other part is if we drill into the organization here. So let's look under this individual. We see all of the people within that group, and then we can go to the top and we can drill down on the other managers. So you can see that all of a sudden that the entire chart has been made interactive as we can step through the chart at these different levels. Now, if you wanted to have a larger chart and have more boxes showing, that's not a problem, because any one of these that we could select, and we could use our grouping tab here, and we could dismiss a division. So it'd be very easy then to go ahead and do that. It's just that the more boxes that you put on a page, it can make the page become harder to read, because it's simply a matter of how many boxes can fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet in this case. And the more boxes that are getting added, the greater the zoom function. So all of that is possible, and there is an undo, which is a Control-Z, for example, or we have an undo function at the top. So that's a very quick example of how we are able to create this basic chart by importing data. Let's take this a step further and do just a little bit of decoration of the chart. If we look at the view option up here, let's just say we wanted to put a logo on the entire chart. So I can click that, and I can go to what is called the master page. And at the master page, I'm going to insert a picture. And the picture is going to be a logo. So for the logo, I have selected an image file, which is shameless marketing here. So I'll click and we have that inside the box here, and we'll OK it. And there we have our logo that's present. It's present on the master page, and just as you would with a product like PowerPoint, then we can go ahead and see what does it look like on each page. And as we page through the entire organization chart, then we see that branding or that logo is available on each page. So keeping it simple, this is the basic approach to creating an organization chart by importing Excel data. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to hear from you. You can contact us, support@officeworksoftware.com.